judiciary, third, or environment.
Oh, I hope it's environment.
Oh,
Yes,
we're on YouTube. Hi, everyone. Yeah.
We need your help on that.
On it.
Okay. Oh, good. Dr. Evans is here. Let's let her get on, make sure she's A-okay, and then we'll open it up. It's just 7 now. Great. Okay, I'm going to give it another minute or two because we're expecting 1 or 2 other committee members. So I'll just give it a minute.
Lisa, just so you know, we have 4 attendees so far besides all the panelists. So
Okay,
actually
great.
now we're up to 6 right now, just so you know.
Okay, great. I think that good. We've got Dr. Evans. Mr. Meek just joined us. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give it 1 more minute just for Josh as he says he's logging in, and then we'll get started. Because I know that lots of people have places to go this evening. So I'll start it at 7:02, Brian Candela. All right, it is 7:02. So I'm going to call to order the Common Council Ordinance Committee regular meeting. It's November 15th. It is 7:02. Joining us this evening so far are David Hooverman, Dominique Johnson, Tom Livingston, Nora Najuski-Eitner. Mr. Brian is here. I thought I saw him. He must, oh yeah, he's there. He's just not in this chair. And Lisa Shanahan. We're expecting Josh Goldstein to join us. And so maybe somebody could note when he does so that we make that appropriate note to the record.
Josh is joining us right now.
Join us. So there we go. It's perfect. Our first order of business is a public hearing to discuss and vote on the temporary prohibition of all cannabis establishments. What we're basically doing is extending the date by which this cannabis ordinance becomes effective, right, Josh? Is there anything else you want to add to that? And we'll open up to public hearing to the extent that there is any.
The only thing I would add, excuse me, sorry, I'm slightly tardy. The only thing I would add is that currently the Zoning Commission has taken the draft regulations to public hearing. So my hope and expectation from that is that this is not too long of an extension. So
Great.
Hopefully we'll have zoning regs in effect. And once those are in effect, the moratorium the way we wrote the ordinance contingent. So as soon as the zoning regs go into effect, then our ordinance and the zoning regulations become effective, and then you don't need a moratorium anymore. So hopefully this is a very temporary stopgap.
Thank you very much. So let's open up the public hearing and see if there's anybody here from the public who would like to be heard on this matter. If you would, Brian, you can be heard on this matter by hitting the raise your hand function, and Brian will unmute you and you can speak. So Brian, does it
None
look
of the
like
attendees have raised their hands.
Okay, so then I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. And then what I'd like to do is have the committee vote on sending this temporary prohibition to the full Common Council at our next meeting. So if you, I don't know if there's any questions or concerns about what we have written. Josh has explained it. So do we need a discussion or can we just take a vote?
I say take a vote.
Okay, so all in favor.
And Lisa, just to clarify, you're saying it'll go to council at their council's next meeting, not the committee's next meeting.
Yes, I mean to say the Common Council's next meeting, which would be Tuesday, November 22nd, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay, so Brian, I don't know if you can see everybody with this formulation because I can't. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it off.
Great, thank you. So all in favor of passing this along to Common Council, please signify by raising your hand. I see 6 votes. Anybody who votes against it, Mr. Meek is the vote against. And then there's no abstentions because we're all accounted for. So that is that. So the next thing I'd like to do is open up public comment to the agenda. So if anybody who would like to be heard this evening on commenting on any items on the public agenda for the ordinance committee, if they could raise their hand, and then Brian will call you one at a time.
So Lisa, just quickly, I do have one email that I need to read into the record.
Okay.
Just let me find it real quick, and then I'll let everyone else speak. This is from Emily Wade, 33 Meeker Court, in Norwalk. Per Lisa Shanahan's email, I just wanted to reach out in support of restrictions on gas-powered leaf blowers. Unfortunately, I'll be unable to make the meeting in real time to voice my opinion there, so I hope this email can suffice in my stead. Should you need more detail as to why I support restrictions, my concerns are environmental and regarding noise pollution. Leaf blowers, whether gas or electric, disrupt overwintering pollinators, so it's best to leave the leaves in order to protect our fragile ecology. Gas-powered leaf blowers are also responsible for a significant amount of emissions. As for noise pollution, I'm a musician and I cannot record in my home studio when there are leaf blowers at my neighbors' houses. Thus, I'd love to see usage restrictions for all types of noisy appliances, for example, day/time usage restrictions. If I knew ahead of time which days would be quiet versus which days would have noise pollution, I could plan my work accordingly. Thank you so much for considering my opinion and for discussing this important topic. And thanks for all the work that you do in service of our city.
Great.
And so I'm just going to go in order. I believe Audrey had her hand up first, and we're just going to go in order. I don't know who had their hand up second. So Audrey, you can unmute yourself and you can speak.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like to make a public comment also about leaf blowers. As a member of the Norwalk environmental community, I want to thank Chairwoman Shanahan and the Ordinance Committee for taking up this topic in your agenda tonight. It takes a lot of courage to move the needle on issues that involve cultural change, and I'm grateful for your courage. Gas-powered leaf blowers, they pollute the air with toxic nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, and non-methane hydrocarbons, along with the noise pollution. We all know that the high decibel levels in air pollution are harmful, and to the landscaping workers in particular. These machines make a racket that breaks the silence of nature, and any amount of quiet I enjoy at home, and I'm fed up with them. People are not the only ones affected. All leaf blowers, whether gas-powered or electric, harm insects, which we're losing in droves worldwide. The blasting air injures and kills insects and other wildlife, and disturbs and removes the shelter that insects rely on to overwinter, the leaves, as the other speaker said. As you know, we need insects to both pollinate plants and our food supply, and we need them also for the health of our soil. A study conducted by Edmunds, which is the car industry experts, showed that a commercial gas-powered leaf blower spews many times more toxic pollutants than a 6,200-pound high-performance Ford pickup truck. In fact, the study showed that a half hour of using the leaf blower was equal in emissions to a 3,900-mile trip from Texas to Alaska in the pickup truck. Electric equipment would be an improvement, or better yet, using rakes. Raking is quiet and helps people stay fit in the process. In my neighborhood, I'm at 19 Kendall Court. Most of my neighbors rake over their leaves, and we get to talk and socialize a bit in the yard while we're doing so without having to yell over the racket of power leaf blowers. I know this will be hard for landscaping companies, but we have to make choices that are best for the overall health of everyone. If we can consider the fact that we need insects for life on Earth to thrive, I see no alternative than to find other ways of caring for our properties. Last, as an earthling concerned about our common home, leaving the leaves has become a stewardship best practice. Many environmental groups recommend leaving at least some of the leaves for our insects. And as a side benefit, this practice means less work for residents and the city. How can we reach out to residents and business owners to bring everyone along for our bright future together? Let's please consider policies and planning that phase out and ban these incredibly noisy, inefficient, and harmful machines, and be leaders in Norwalk to care for Mother Earth, because without Mother Earth, as you know, we have nothing. So thank you so much for your work on this important issue. I'm really thrilled that you're taking it up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Just for the record, Diana Revolus, Common Council member, joined at 7:08 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining, Diana.
Okay, so let's
Of course.
our next public member of the public join. Looks like
Michelle Sorensen, you can mute yourself and please go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I do not have prepared remarks, but I want to say that I have a registered landscaping business in Norwalk. It's called Native Landscape CT. I use hand tools, and if I use a blower or a weed whacker, it is electric, battery powered. And I am able to care for properties from a quarter acre to an acre without using gas blowered equipment, gas powered equipment. I do not mow lawns. I take care of shrubs and flowers and flower beds and trees. And I use hand saws for pruning. I am 72 years old, and gas powered machines make me feel sick. With anyone my age has coronary artery blockage, whether they've been to a doctor or not. And that reduces the amount of oxygen that goes to your heart. And every time there's a truck or a gas blower within 50 feet of me, I start feeling lightheaded. The effects are immediate. And I think of all the young children on my street. There are a lot of them, and the other older people, but young children who have asthma. And I'm on a quarter acre property. There is almost always at this time of year a machine whining in the background. I'm a bird watcher, and this is highly disturbing to birds. We've lost 3 billion birds in the last decade. Extinction is happening as we live our lives. This is the 6th greatest extinction event in the history of the world that we are living through. And I think we all have to do our part to make things better. And I didn't even mention climate change. And of course, that's a primary concern of mine as well, that I'm doing everything I can to reduce my use of fossil fuels. And by supporting this initiative, all of you will be making a large step to helping birds, seniors, children's health, and climate health of the earth. So I really appreciate your taking this very, very seriously, and hearing from a landscaper who knows that it's possible at 72 to rake a quarter acre property without any difficulty. There's no excuse for using gas blowered machines.
Michelle, just before you go, if you could just give your full name and your address for the record.
Yes, Michelle with 1 L, Michele, Sorensen, Sorensen. I'm at 24 Poplar Street, which I have in the Q&A, and my business is called Native Landscape CT. It is registered with the city of Norwalk.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. Who do we have next, Brian?
Hold on one second. It looks like it says Serafino Carey. You can remove your mute, and if you could just give your full name and your address before you start speaking. Thank you.
Yes, correct. It's Serafino Carey. I hope everyone can hear me.
We can.
I'm at 19 Kendall Court in Norwalk, Connecticut, resident for approximately 20 years now. Thank you. Good evening to everybody. Thank you for taking this matter and offering public comment. Very interested. Thank you, Michelle, for your comments and the other comments that were offered, both read and spoken. I don't have any prepared written comments, but what comes to mind is a practical consideration in moving towards this proposition. I think Michelle pointed out some good things about the commercial sector and how she manages her business, which I think is wonderful. But the city, I see the city as setting the metric for this, and then perhaps asking people like Michelle, who are in the industry, to propose workable solutions for other businesses to emulate and also offer their solutions in the mix. Because I think the public sector per se can't come up with all the solutions on their own. They can only provide the metrics. And it perhaps would be productive if the city embraces industry and invites them to the table to say, look, this is our metric. What kind of solutions can you provide? And Michelle demonstrated some that she embraces herself. But to make that move one step further, it'd be wonderful if the city offered some kind of pilot program to demonstrate that this is workable, not just to the citizens of Norwalk, but to the businesses who are involved and affected by the proposition. So perhaps a pilot program using city property that tests these alternatives that would meet the metrics of the proposition and satisfy them and show that the industry at large that this is workable. And I think that would be a way to invite everybody to the table. And if it has cachet and businesses buy into it and say, yeah, this is workable, this is a good image for us, it sort of spreads on its own rather than being forced. And I think that's one of the keys. So that's my opinion. And thank you for my comment, taking my comment.
Thank you.
Are there other hands, Brian?
Yes, there are. We have T. Dinkin. If you could unmute yourself, give your name and address, and then please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tracy Dinkin, D-I-N-K-I-N, and I'm at 327 Flax Hill Road. I also, first of all, I want to thank you for having this meeting and addressing this problem. This is a big issue as far as I'm concerned. And I really want to thank you all for doing this and being here. When I first moved onto Flax Hill Road, which was in '96, it was very, very quiet considering how busy a street Flax Hill Road is. And with the addition of not only just the traffic, but the leaf blowers and the landscaping equipment has increased in sound, volume, dirt. The noise from the leaf blowers is just, at times, it's literally unbearable. We've had leaf blowers going from landscapers in our neighborhood. There'll be like 3-4 houses all at a time. We've had leaf blowers running while the landscapers take a lunch break and leave the equipment on. I've watched leaf blowers blowing a pile of dirt, a small pile of dirt that could be handled with a broom, that could have been kicked into the street. These things are just completely unnecessary, and the suburban lawn has just become a huge environmental problem. I just want to add my voice in with the people who've already spoken. I agree with everything they say, that this needs to be addressed. It's just the amount of pollution that these things throw into the air is worse than any car or truck. And they're oil burning. You're breathing in basically smoke from an oil fire. It's disturbing the healthful insects. It's disturbing the local animals. And we all want that. People who live in Norwalk and in Fairfield County seem to love their nature, the wildlife that comes onto their property. This doesn't help. Also, it's not good for the lawn. If you want to keep your lawn looking nice, this is blowing hot desert air onto your leaves. It's sucking the moisture out. And we already have a situation with the environment where it doesn't rain as much as we need it to. So that doesn't help either. And I do think, I agree with the last guy too, that it would be nice if the town of Norwalk took the lead in this. First of all, for the area, for the state of Connecticut, and wouldn't it be nice if we set an example for a wider area for the country of making this an environmentally healthy area? Also, noise pollution is truly a problem. It really is pollution. It really is a troublesome thing. We've had summers here where the fireworks just go on until everybody's dogs are on medication. This shouldn't be. And the leaf blowers are another point of noise pollution. And this truly is a real thing. This is a real health issue. This is not just people complaining. And I guess that's about it. It's just, there's nothing good that comes of this. We've lived for thousands of years without leaf blowers, we've lived for hundreds of years with a rake. We made it this far in human history. I think if we went back to rakes for most of the time, we would live through that.
Thank you for your comments.
Well, thank you
you.
so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Who do we have next, Brian, if anyone?
Okay. Betsy, if you could unmute your full name and address, and then please go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Betsy Wren. I'm at 67 Weed Avenue, and that's in West Norwalk. And we have 1 acre zoning around here. And I would say, like Tracy, it's a mental health issue. I mean, we listen to leaf blowers all day long, all summer long, all fall, into the winter, after dark. It must have gone on for 3 hours today, and it penetrates the windows. I have to listen to music when I don't want to. I can't go outside. We're big gardeners, and we have had countless peaceful, beautiful gardening experiences utterly ruined by these leaf blowers. That there aren't even any leaves. They're blowing grass, they're blowing clippings, they're blowing the driveway, they're blowing the street, they're blowing anything they can point their gigantic hose at. And it is untenable. It's like, I just feel like life isn't worth living. Why do we even have suburbs? Why do we have I may as well go live at the airport at LaGuardia. It's just as loud. So it's just, and it's not landscapers. Yeah, and the filth, the stench rolls into our yard, and it's not always landscapers. All of our neighbors, that's their hobby. It's like a male hobby, is to go out and just blast everything for hours. The man behind us, 2 hours. He'll do it at night, 8 o'clock at night. We've had dinners ruined by filth and stench and noise. So really, something has to be done. And I want to add, my sister lives in Charlottesville, and they don't use leaf blowers there. So her neighborhood is like serene. It's so quiet. Oh, thank you for doing this. I so appreciate that this is even being discussed, because it's a mental. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments before we start our presentations?
Yeah, hold on one second. We got one more. Mr. Kevin T-Pass, you can unmute yourself. Please give your full name and your address, and please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Brian. I'm Kevin T-Paz. I'm at 7 Barnfield Road here in Rowayton. And I just wanted to add a little piece of data that I think would be helpful to the council. And that is the most recent projections as to the rate of insect decline. And it is about 9% a year. That means that every year we have only 91% of the insects that we had the year before. These are the insects that allow the food chain to exist. And if I was in the 50s and 60s, which by the way I was, but if I had the foresight to tell them, stop using gas engines, you're blowing up the climate of the earth, I would like the opportunity to have done that. I don't, because we can't go back, but we can talk now. We are killing the insects that support our food chain. End of presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to see you again. Hope all's well.
If there's no one else, I'll start the presentation.
So right now, there is no one else who has their hand raised.
Okay, great. What I'd like to do to honor the guests that we have who have come from out of town and also from town, is to move up the discussion on the leaf blowers to now, as some of our presenters have to leave. So can I entertain a motion to change the agenda such that we move the new business? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. All in favor of moving up this discussion so our presenters can all stay? Thank you. It looks as though I don't have Mr. Meeks vote, but what's
He just voted yes as well as hands up.
Great, thank you. So what I'd like to say is that, as many of you know, I was first elected to council in November of 2019. And before the first quarter of 2020 was out, COVID had sent us all home. And most of us were studying and working from home at that time. And it was perhaps then, for the first time, we all became acutely aware of the constant drone of leaf blowers from early spring to the late fall months. I began to hear from our constituents asking if there was anything we could do about this disruptive and irritating state of affairs. So I started to research leaf blowers, their effect on gardens, our environment, and our own health. And I was surprised at what I found. I won't testify on behalf of the experts who have come today to talk with us. They will be much more compelling than what I could preview. But I've invited them to join us this evening to provide us a baseline understanding as to why many other neighboring jurisdictions have banned the use of gas-powered leaf blowers and curtailed the hours and months that electric blowers may be used. We have 4 speakers this evening: Alice Eli, Louise Washer, who is speaking on behalf of Valerie Jacobs, who at the last minute couldn't join us, Dr. Sarah Evans, and Jeff Kordelak. And I'll introduce each speaker before they present. I'm going to change up the order that I had mentioned to the speakers earlier because Dr. Evans has to leave by 8 o'clock. So I want to make sure that we get her testimony before she needs to leave. So let me introduce her. I've got my notes right here. Dr. Sarah Evans, who some of you might remember helped us with the pesticide ordinance, is an assistant professor of environmental medicine and public health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Her research focuses on the impacts of early life environmental exposures on child development. As a faculty to the Region to Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit in the New York State Centers for Excellence in Environmental Health, Dr. Evans advises families and communities on steps they can take to create safer environments. She's a trusted voice on the health effects of environmental exposures and what individuals can do to protect their own health and advocate for healthier policies in local communities. Dr. Evans obtained her doctorate in neuroscience from the Weill Cornell Medical College and her master's in public health from Mount Sinai, where she also completed a 3-year fellowship in environmental pediatrics. And Dr. Evans, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving up some family time to help us better understand the effects of leaf blowers on ourselves and our children.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I think some of you know that I used to live in Norwalk. I lived in Norwalk for 5 years and I live in Fairfield now. So I'm just so impressed with the work that you all are doing in this area and what you've already done. And can I share? I can share my screen, right? Yes.
You'll help her with that, Brian, right? There we go. Thank you.
And let me make sure I can present. Does that show full screen? Yeah, okay. So as Lisa already mentioned, and some of you know, I work with a team of researchers and clinicians at Mount Sinai in New York City, studying the early life impacts of environmental exposures, considering the environment very broadly. So chemical pollutants, air pollutants, and also things like social stressors. And I work with a team of pediatricians through the Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit. And for over a decade now, to my knowledge, we have responded to inquiries from communities about the health impacts of leaf blowers and have successfully supported some bans and restrictions on the use of that equipment in communities in Connecticut and in Westchester. So we have sort of a long history of hearing about this issue and thinking about this issue. And I live in Fairfield, as I mentioned, and I probably mentioned this when I spoke to you all about pesticides. I live in a neighborhood that has very small properties. And so we're very close to each other. And we actually have a text chain that starts every time the leaf blowers start up. It's kind of a joke that we have in our neighborhood because, as others have mentioned, sometimes there's a team of 5 people on the property next door to me. We also have very few trees, so there's very little to actually blow around. And many of us have been working from home largely throughout the pandemic. So it's become a true nuisance and a real actual pollutant that we're all experiencing on a daily basis. So I would be thrilled if Norwalk paved the way and influenced Fairfield towards doing something like this. And as I was putting together some slides, I found that there's no shortage of comics like this about leaf blowers. So I think this is really something that is a prevalent nuisance across the country. So we already heard some callers talk about air pollution exposure through gas-powered leaf blowers. And I think you have a very educated community. And so many of you all have already mentioned some of the things that I'm going to touch on. And I'll just reinforce some of what was already said in terms of exactly what the hazards are that come from gas-powered leaf blowers. There are a number of air pollutants. We already heard an equivalent that's been mentioned about driving a Ford pickup truck from Texas to Alaska as the equivalent of using a leaf blower for 30 minutes or for 1 hour. Another estimate from a study that was conducted by the California Air Resources Board estimated that using a gas-powered leaf blower for 1 hour is the equivalent of 15 hours of driving a Toyota Camry. And so whichever way you slice it, we're looking at a lot of pollutants like particulate matter, benzene and formaldehyde, which are known carcinogens, hydrocarbons and gases that contribute to climate change, and also form secondary pollutants like ozone. It was estimated that something like 150 million Americans owned a leaf blower in 2020. And the use of small garden equipment has increased over the last decade or so. So it's difficult to find really accurate studies that have looked at the contribution of the types of engines that are used in gas-powered leaf blowers and other gas-powered lawn equipment to think about what the equivalencies really are. But EPA did conduct a study looking at data from 2011, which showed that these two-stroke non-road engines, so in general, non-road engines, so not automobiles, are a major source of air pollutants. And they specifically honed in this study on garden equipment, so gas-powered lawn and garden equipment is what they refer to as GLGE in this study. And then even further, zoomed in on gas-powered lawn maintenance equipment, which they refer, which mostly encompasses things like lawnmowers and leaf blowers. And then looked even further at the contribution of two-stroke engine lawn maintenance equipment to emissions. And so essentially in a nutshell, what they found was that they estimated 121 million lawn and garden equipment items were being utilized. And in total, that was generating 27 million tons of pollutants in the year 2011. When they looked at just the maintenance equipment, so the things like lawnmowers and leaf blowers, they found that of all of the emissions, those were responsible for more than 40% of VOC production and about half of the particulate matter 2.5. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of health impacts. But so a very large percentage of the emissions that they observed were coming from those smaller maintenance equipment, not the large tractors and such. And then they wanted to look at the two-stroke engines because we know that those are particularly dirty and they burn fuel really inefficiently. And so what they found when they looked at that was this massive amount of particulate matter, 2.5, was actually attributable to those two-stroke engines. So that's very concerning. Again, I'll say a little bit more about the health impacts of PM 2.5. But the conclusion that this EPA study made was that the routine use of GLMEs, maintenance equipment, in the vicinity of residential neighborhoods, schools, parks, and other public spaces may be exposing the public to unnecessary and preventable health risks effects, communities and environmental, public health, and other government agencies should create policies and programs to protect the public from GLGE air pollutants and promote non-polluting alternatives. So, much like what this ordinance is proposing to do, the EPA has also recommended. So, looking at some of the health effects of air pollution, and I think we heard some of this mentioned previously by some of the callers to public comment. So often we think about the health effects being restricted to respiratory problems or asthma, but the air pollutants that I mentioned that are emitted by this equipment are also associated with increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, impaired brain function and learning, adverse outcomes during pregnancy, lower life expectancy, endocrine disruption, and then of course, lung diseases, lung cancer, and asthma. And of particular concern are people who work outdoors, and certainly in the case of the leaf blowers, an occupational hazard to landscapers. Landscaping is actually considered to be a very high risk job, in part because of the exposures that are experienced by the people who are operating this equipment. People with pre-existing conditions, of course, frontline communities, interestingly enough, pregnant women. So we know that air pollution actually affects fetal development, and exposure to air pollution during pregnancy is associated with increased risk of asthma in the child later in life. Infants and young children, this is my area of expertise, thinking about early life exposures, not only because their lungs are developing, but because they inhale faster and higher volumes of air than adults do. So they actually experience higher exposures to air pollutants. I have small children, and so when all of this yard equipment is running outside, I'm concerned about their exposures due to the proximity to that equipment. And then, of course, older adults and the elderly as well have decreased lung function and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So I mentioned this issue of particulate matter. And we're particularly concerned about this type of air pollution because it penetrates deep into the lungs. And so it's not only associated with increased respiratory illnesses and asthma and lung cancer, we also see some evidence that particulate matter from air pollution exposure was associated with increased COVID-19 severity during the pandemic. And then these even smaller particulates can penetrate very deep into the lungs. So they get down deep into the lungs in the areas where oxygen exchange happens, cause inflammation, and can cause all sorts of respiratory issues. It's estimated that air pollution contributes to 1 in 10 deaths in children under 5 years. Again, we're very concerned about children's rapidly developing brains and lungs. And it's also estimated that air pollution is associated with 600,000 deaths in children under 15 and half of all of the lower respiratory infections that children under 5 experience. If you have children under 5 now, or even over 5, you know that they're being very hard hit with RSV and other infections, and our emergency rooms are currently overwhelmed. So we're learning more all the time about how air pollution is increasing the severity of a lot of the respiratory infections that children get. So that's what we know about air pollution from leaf blowers. And so the other major hazard and pollutant that has been mentioned many times is noise. And there are many comics, again, about the noise from leaf blowers. So I think it's really interesting that in the messaging that the CDC puts out about noise exposure, they actually use a leaf blower right there at that 85 decibel line, above which extended exposures can cause hearing damage. 85 decibels is the limit that the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health also sets for exposure to workers. So here CDC is telling us that 2 hours of exposure to a leaf blower can cause damage, or to the amount of sound that comes from a leaf blower, which here, as you see, is around 90 decibels. And so it's not just the level or the intensity of the noise from the leaf blowers that make them really problematic. And again, it's kind of hard to find studies that have systematically measured the noise from a leaf blower at various distances. This is a study that was conducted by researchers at Harvard in 2017, looking at the frequency of the exposure. So when they actually characterized the type of sound that the leaf blowers emitted, they found that as far out as 800 feet from the source, obviously it was the loudest, right at the source of the user, but they were measuring from one single gas-powered leaf blower all the way out at 800 feet. Levels that were well above the WHO outdoor daytime recommended level of 55 decibels. And in particular, that was shown for the low frequency sound. So a lot of the frequency of the sound from a gas-powered leaf blower is in that low frequency range, which is capable of traveling further distances and also traveling through walls and windows and buildings. So the quality of the sound of the leaf blower makes it such that it can impact neighbors at a pretty far distance. This same group also conducted a study looking at the difference in sound between battery-powered leaf blowers and gas-powered leaf blowers, and found that the sound from the gas-powered leaf blowers was higher in intensity, but also lower frequency, and so had the ability to travel further distances. So as others have already mentioned, noise is pollution. It's characterized by the Environmental Protection Agency as a pollutant and regulated as a pollutant. Much like air pollutants, we see similar vulnerabilities even to pregnant women. So the American Academy of Pediatrics actually has a statement that they're currently revising about the hazards of exposure to noise during pregnancy. Also, of course, for infants and children and for the workers who are experiencing the highest exposure. We think a lot, of course, about hearing loss from exposure to noise, but there are a number of other associated health outcomes, including stress, mental health problems, difficulty learning. The recommended decibel level for optimal learning in a classroom is 35 decibels. And I showed you, a leaf blower can be up at 90 decibels and well over 55 even at far distances. So the schools in the communities where this equipment is being used are also impacted. High blood pressure and cardiovascular disease as well. And this is just a diagram from the World Health Organization outlining some of the known health risks from noise exposure, including decreased lifespan. And so because, just to sort of highlight that this really is a concern, our Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit we have a series of prescriptions that we distribute through health providers and through our website and to communities on different types of adverse exposures and how you can reduce your exposure and resources that you can access to do so. And just so you know, we do have a prescription related to noise. So this is a real exposure and a real health risk that we are concerned about. And so lastly, I'll just zoom out a little bit to state again some of the obvious, and I think maybe others will touch more on the environmental impacts of using gas-powered leaf blowers, but of course, we're very concerned about the impacts that the emissions have on climate change and the myriad of health risks that are associated, beyond the direct exposures to air pollutants. We're very concerned about the changing climate and all of the associated health impacts that come with that. And lastly, because I'm a big fan of all of your initiatives and of the pollinator pathway, I will just emphasize again the Leave the Leaves campaign, which our community in Fairfield and Sustainable Task Force have been promoting as well, very visibly. And just to say that there are human health impacts as well to promoting pollinators and promoting biodiversity, including things like access to food plant medicines shelter, and also healthy soil as a carbon sink. And so that is my last slide. And I will just, if you are interested in connecting to additional resources that we have at Mount Sinai, or through our pediatric environmental health specialty unit, you can take a picture and connect directly. And I can also provide the slides and the links afterwards.
That would be great. If you could. I think that I'd like to have all the presenters prepare their, share their slides, because I'll put together a packet that can be attached to the minutes and will also be shared with all of the Common Council members so that they have easy access to reading this material. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans. Because Dr. Evans has to leave, do any of our committee members have questions for Dr. Evans on her materials before she has to depart? At this point, looks like we're good. So Dr. Evans, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I will be sending you also a letter that includes some additional resources and citations, and so I will send you something in writing in addition to the slides.
Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the
I'll
time.
stay on. I'll stay on a little bit longer in case anything comes up.
Great. And we'll attach, as I said, all of the materials that all of our presenters will present, all their slides to the minutes so that they're accessible to the public and to our committee members. So our next speaker is going to be Alice Ely. She is a Yukon Advanced Master Gardener and Master Composter. She's the creator of multiple public and private butterfly habitats in Fairfield County. She frequently speaks on the importance of sustainable garden practices to promote species diversity and to protect habitats. In addition to promoting native plants through the pollinator pathway and educating on sustainable gardening at the Westport Wakeman Town Farm, she serves as a Monarch Watch conservation specialist for the Northeast. And she's currently completing her studies for a New York Botanical Gardening certification. When she's not out in her own garden, she coaches homeowners in sustainable gardening through her own business, gardenwithalice.com. So thank you very much for joining us. Alice, you look frozen.
Yes.
There you are. You're frozen.
Okay, good. All right. And I am going to share my screen. There we go. And I'm going to full screen mode. All right. So what I developed this presentation for first to present in Westport, we were challenged by the landscaper community in Westport saying to us, we can't enforce on homeowners sustainable garden practices. They need to be educated. They need to ask us for these things. Please step up and help. So especially on behalf of the pollinator pathway, we put together and presented to, we have actually presented this presentation I have to a number of different groups throughout Fairfield County and several times within Westport to educate groups. And it's part of our mission amongst the organizers of the pollinator pathway to really speak for the pollinators, because they can't speak for themselves. So this is about rethinking leaf removal and to think in terms of how can we manage our leaves in a pollinator friendly way. Several of your members of the public have referenced some of the very things that I'm going to talk about, and Sarah did too. So I am not going to dwell at length on any of these points, but simply to reiterate, yes, we need to rethink yard cleanup for the sake of all creatures. And sterile gardens make for silent springs. Think of them as food deserts for all the creatures who make up the ecosystem that we depend on. Gas leaf blowers in particular cause harm to habitats by their very nature. Leaves play such an important role in a healthy yard, and spotless, tidy yards are not sustainable. They have become the norm, but this is something where we really need to shift the paradigm back to something more sustainable. So all of us need to think in terms of embracing the new aesthetic of yard beauty. Look at it and smile to yourselves and say, that's a healthy yard. Tell your landscaper, if you're not doing it yourself, to leave in place or mulch the leaves. Summer debris especially can be mulch mowed. Westport has focused on a summer focused ordinance in saying that this is the time when high powered leaf cleanup really isn't necessary. The yard that is as sterile and unnatural as a golf course like the one on the left here is something we need to get in the habit of seeing that looking as out of date as a horse and buggy. Probably the wrong analogy in this case, but it's something that when we see it, you should say to yourself, that is a dated approach. It's not what needs to be. When you see a yard which has leaves in the beds like this, you know you're looking at a yard that nurtures itself and provides habitat. So don't blow it, mulch it or leave it. Gas blowers' force and noise, just their force and noise alone is injurious to plants, insects, and soil, and disturbs wildlife. A lot of people don't realize about the dangers of ground level ozone. And interestingly, if you look at the picture, Yale did a study on this. And by the way, every statement that I make in this presentation comes from scientific research, and I have a list at the end of the presentation sourcing the various scientific sources for these for the statements that I'm making. But here in the left, you see 2 tulip tree leaves. The speckled one on the bottom, that is ground level ozone pollution's impact. Some plants are more susceptible to it than others, but I'm sure if you look around your yard, you will see some stippling and speckling on leaves. Can be caused by other things than ozone, but it's an impact that people are not aware of. Mulch mowing allows light leaf cover to disappear into the lawn. I want to tell you that I use electric mulch mowing in my own yard, and even now in November with all the trees bare, that has been sufficient because it was done weekly to contain. There has been no raking of my lawn necessary. All the clippings have vanished into the lawn week by week with the mulch mower. Leaves and clippings are adding nutrients back to the soil and improve texture. And by the way, when they add nutrients, it makes it less necessary to fertilize your lawn. And those of us who live on communities along the Sound know that excessive fertilizer leaching into the Sound is a major problem for polluting our waterways. So leaving debris under trees and shrubs in particular, you are providing valuable habitat and nutrients being returned back into the soil, breaking down, going back to feed the roots. We are completing the cycle of energy from soil to tree to soil again. And there is a concept called a soft landing for insects. Many insects, beneficial insects, overwinter in leaf debris. Leaves also help prevent erosion, so they do many services for us. There are numerous creature-friendly reasons not to blow. It's called the duff layer, that kind of layer of browned leaves and so forth under plantings. And blowing it away, you destroy habitat. Most butterflies and moths overwinter in the landscape as eggs or chrysalis, or even as adults. That leaf litter is their cover. Like birds, and Kevin Tipas, one of the community members, spoke on this point. We know we're losing insects at a rapid clip. So every insect we can protect through habitat in our yards, we are really helping stem that problem. So there are cavity nesters who remain in, and chrysalises that remain on stems. Leaf blowing can destroy these because the mere force of the wind just blows them away. There are other creatures, salamanders, red bats, fireflies, and many more who live under leaf litter. And a lot of people have commented, gee, we don't see as many fireflies as we used to. Well, this is one of the reasons why. They need that coverage in the winter months when they're not active. Leaves, I think of leaves as a resource. They are superb free mulch. It's so crazy that we spend money on mulch and bag the leaves and put them at the curb. It does such a good job of enriching the soil. You can apply it under trees, in garden beds, on paths. You know that it's not been treated with chemicals as commercial mulch can be. It decomposes more quickly than wood mulch in healthy soil. And it is more sustainable than purchased mulch shipped from elsewhere. I mean, why keep it where it lands? 1 cubic yard of mulch delivered to your home costs $30 or more, I'm sure, in some communities, plus delivery. And mulch that you get in plastic bags at the home center is even more expensive. So here's this valuable free resource right in your backyard. Just a few tips to close my presentation on. If you have medium leaf fall, you can use a mulching mower. Light leaf fall, leave them as they are, leave them alone, they'll disperse naturally. Heavy leaf fall, if you mulch mow in stages, a thick layer doesn't accumulate. If it's too mulch to mow, you can rake it in large piles to an out-of-the-way place and leave them to decompose. After 2 years, you can dig out the lower layer to add nutrients to your plants. That's a valuable leaf mold. Woods, if you have a wooded border, it's a perfect place to rake leaves into the woods and forget about them. Shredded leaves and small twigs even are a fantastic flower bed mulch, and it's a finer than unshredded leaves. So it breaks down more quickly and helps enrich the beds. Also, I always save leaves for my compost heaps. It's an invaluable soil amendment. And here you find links to all the places, the sources for all the statistics that I quoted during my talk. And that's it for the pollinator story. Thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Alice. Alice, I think I may have mispronounced your last name, which is E. Lee, not
correct. That's right. Thank you.
If I mispronounced it, I want to make that correction. No. Does anyone have questions for Alice while we're at this stage of the presentation? So if not, I'm going to move on. So Valerie Sealing Jacobs was going to join us. She had a conflict. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about her. And then Louise Washer is going to pick up her presentation and do it on her behalf. So let me tell you about both women. Valerie Sealing Jacobs is on the faculty of Columbia University. She works part-time as a freelance writer and editor. Before switching careers, she practiced corporate law for more than 20 years and was a partner at Wiggum and Dana, which is a Connecticut-based law firm. She currently serves on the advisory board of Quiet Communities, a nonprofit dedicated to help communities transition to greener landscaping practices. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Cornell Law Review, and other publications. She holds a Bachelor of Science and a law degree from Cornell University. And our very own Louise Washer, who all of us, I think, know, is president of the Norwalk River Watershed Association. She's been a member of the board since 2010. She also serves on the Norwalk Mayor's Water Quality Committee, and she's on the steering committee for the Hudson to the Housatonic Conservation Partnership, which is known as H2H. She also sits on the board of the Pollinator Pathway, which she co-founded in Wilton and Norwalk in 2017. And for all of you to know, the Pollinator Pathway has grown to over 300 towns in 9 states in these past 5 years. So it's been extremely successful. So Louise, thank you very much for stepping in for Valerie and sharing her slides.
Thanks. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. As a representative of those 2 organizations, NRWA and Pollinator Pathway, I support this as well. And thank you for bringing this to a conversation in Norwalk. So I'm going to read Valerie's letter into the record first, and then she has a short PowerPoint that I'll go to and share my screen. Does that sound good? So dear members of the Ordinance Committee, I am part of a group that has been working toward the adoption of a leaf blower ordinance in Westport. As part of that effort, we have collected data and materials on the toxic effects of gas-powered leaf blowers, GLBs, and I would like to share some of that information with you. Besides the noise, which is linked to heart attacks, hearing loss, strokes, and concentration problems in children, gas leaf blowers are hugely toxic to humans in other ways, in part because their two-stroke engines spew about 30% of their fuel unspent. This means gas leaf blowers are contaminating our yards with benzene, butadiene, and formaldehyde, three of the most carcinogenic materials on the planet. And gas leaf blowers also produce prodigious amounts of fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, which passes right through lung tissue and is directly linked to lung and other cancers. Scientists believe there is no safe level of particulate matter 2.5. Lest you think that the problem from gas leaf blowers is overstated, consider this. The level of particulate matter 2.5 around the operator of a gas leaf blower has been found to be 54 times higher than at one of the busiest intersections in Los Angeles. And then, of course, there's the environmental impact. Gas leaf blowers desiccate soil, a huge problem given the current drought, destroy insect and animal habitats, and contribute significantly to the formation of ozone, which in turn contributes to global warming. We are already seeing effects of climate change in Connecticut in the form of hotter weather and more intense rainstorms and more droughts, I'll add. And gas leaf blowers contribute mightily to the problem. Experts estimate that using one gas blower for 1 hour creates as much smog-forming pollution as driving a Toyota Camry 1,100 miles. In fact, Fairfield County already has some of the highest ozone levels east of the Mississippi. For those reasons, every local environmental group you can think of, including Earth Place, Sustainable Westport, Wakeman Town Farm, Aspetuck Land Trust, the Pollinator Pathway, and I'll add the Norwalk River Watershed Association, eschew their use. For those and other reasons, we are happy to hear that Norwalk is now considering joining the more than 200 municipalities around the country that already restrict or ban the use of these machines. Examples are Scarsdale, Larchmont, Newton, Maplewood, and Washington, D.C. And I would like to offer my assistance in your endeavor. Unfortunately, however, I will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. I would, however, be happy to make myself available at a future date. In the meantime, I would like to submit the following materials for your review and consideration. One, a PDF of a PowerPoint presentation I originally prepared for Westport, and that's the PowerPoint that I'll go through in a minute. Two, a detailed memorandum prepared by Quiet Communities, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping communities transition to greener landscaping practices, entitled What to Do About Gas-Powered Leaf Blowers. This memo sets forth the health and environmental risks posed by gas leaf blowers and contains sites and links to back up the studies and scientific data. Three is 6 letters or 2 are resolutions adopted by medical professionals, all attesting to the health problems posed by gas leaf blowers. A one-page document prepared by Quiet Communities entitled Gas-Powered versus Battery Electric Leaf Blowers, What You Need to Know About the Noise. This document is important as it explains how the decibel scale works. Specifically, because the scale is logarithmic, each 10 decimal increase doubles the perceived loudness. Thus, even if a battery blower is only 10 decimals less than a gas leaf blower, the human ear will perceive the gas blower as twice as loud. A 20-point difference will then be perceived as 4 times as loud. Moreover, this document explains why the noise from gas leaf blowers can travel farther and penetrate walls and windows in a way that the sound from a battery blower cannot, which is something that we already discussed. 5, the 5th attachment that you guys will receive, a rebuttal letter prepared by Jamie Banks of Quiet Communities, debunking many of the claims made by Larry Will, a lobbyist for the landscaping industry. This document also contains information on the type, quality, and problems associated with gas leaf blowing noise and lays out what the EPA and the World Health Organization say about noise and health. 6, a compilation of letters from environmental activists regarding the Westport Ordinance. 7, a Mythbusters sheet about gas leaf blowers prepared by quiet communities. And then 8 is 2 op-ed essays from the New York Times about this issue. Finally, I note that Kristen Schneeman, the Westport RTM member who has been leading the effort there, has posted many other relevant documents in the cloud. And then she provides a link so that you all can have access to everything that's been collected in Westport. And then I'm going to share my screen and just go through. This is very short. Yeah. And I think we've covered some of this, but this is her PowerPoint. And it's sort of interesting to say there are 4 categories of health and environmental problems. And as she was going through this with me, she was pointing out that some of them come from the engine, the toxic emissions and pollutants that Dr. Evans talked about, and the noise. And then the fuel spillage is something we hadn't talked about that we'll cover more. And then also what happens coming out because of the high powered air coming out. So I am gonna make one change here. Okay. So the first thing are the toxic emissions. We've gone through this, and so I'm going to just race through it, but just that gas leaf blowers are a major source of emissions, including these hydrocarbons and the volatile organic compounds listed here. And that when those combine, they create ozone, and the ground level ozone, as we've already talked about, is so harmful to the workers and also anyone nearby. Also, carbon monoxide is released, and then the fine particulate matter that we also mentioned. They're so tiny that they pass through a regular cloth mask and need N95 masks for workers. And then she goes into the ozone problem a little bit here, pointing out that Fairfield County already has extremely poor air quality, and she does have all those studies included in the materials that Lisa has. In 2021, Fairfield County exceeded the EPA maximum ozone levels on 21 separate days, and we also have high particulate matter 2.5 levels as well. Let's see, a single gas leaf blower can produce 30 million micrograms of particulate matter, 2.5 every hour. And I read in other parts of her materials that that's 5 pounds of particulate matter, and it can stay suspended in the air for a week or longer. California estimates that the pollution from gas-powered gardening equipment now exceeds that produced by vehicles in the state, which is, I believe, why they have passed new legislation restricting them. Gas leaf blower emissions affect the environment. Here's what Alice was showing us, the ozone effect on plants. And it's also harmful to migratory birds, as has been mentioned, like sparrows and warblers, which make up 86% of all North American land bird species. It's also a greenhouse gas, which we talked about, but this image just helps to illustrate that. And then for the noise, I think we covered this pretty well with Dr. Evans, but these are all the risks to humans. And also the loud noises disrupt animal communications as well as habitat. Alice did such a good job of talking about the importance of leaf matter to pollinators, but other animals also suffer from the disruption of their habitat. And biodiversity we talked about. I'm trying to sort of hurry here. And the noise from left is qualitatively different. This is just a repeat a little bit, but this is a tough one for me to understand. The noise from gas-powered blowers is qualitatively different from the noise of battery blowers. And it's because of that low frequency in the chart that Dr. Evans showed us. So that's why we all hear them so loudly in our own houses, even when they're sort of far away down the street. And she has also included in the materials some comparisons here between electric blowers and gas blowers with specific makes and showing the difference in how loud they are. This is the dispersal of dangerous materials. The high velocity air jets on blowers disperse materials at 200 miles an hour. They aerate dust, pesticides, heavy metals, animal feces, They blow away topsoil. They desiccate the soil as well as pollen and sap and other natural plant substances, and they contribute to just the loss of vegetation. They can also injure or destroy birds, small mammals, and insects and pollinators, as we've talked about. And then her last slide is on fuel spillage. An estimated 17 million gallons of fuel is spilled into the soil and eventually ends up in our water every year in the US, refilling all gardening equipment. So not just leaf blowers, but all gardening equipment. And that affects not only groundwater and surface water, but also the animals' aquatic life and marine life as well. And that is the end of her presentation.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you,
Our
Louise.
our final presenter is Jeff Kordelak. He is a landscape gardener in Fairfield County. He was formerly employed by Soundwaters in Stamford, the National Audubon Society in Greenwich, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Connecticut, and he was the executive director of NOFA Organic Accreditation Program, which is the sole organization dedicated to setting and teaching the NOFA standards for organic land care. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Colorado State University in Natural Resources Management and Conservation Biology. Jeff currently owns and operates an organic landscaping company in Fairfield that's known as Organic Ways and Means, LLC. His company's run profitably for 4 years using only electric mowing, blowing, and trimming equipment. In Norwalk, he manages the Village Community Association. He might know you, Nora. You might have met him or seen him around, and a lot of other homes in our area, both large and small. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and for talking about how landscapers might be viewing this concern.
Thank you. It's really great to be with you all. What a wonderful group of presenters, top-notch information. You have way more attachments and references than you'll need. If you're listening to the basics, that it's generally not good to use a lot of gas blowers. It's not good to use a lot of gas mowers. It's getting spilled everywhere. There's other ways to deal with the leaves other than starting at one end of the property and moving the entire pile to the other end of the property. There's just other ways. So as Lisa mentioned, I've been running my company for 4 years. This is after 25 years of helping people look at organics as an option for their lawn, for their home, for their food. I'm generally an environmental type of guy. Worked for nonprofits always. And when I started my company 4 years ago, it was kind of a mission to see if it works. I mean, I knew organic worked, so I could start a company doing organic landscaping, which is very much in demand. It's hard to find organic landscaping. So knew it could do that, but I wanted to see if I could pull off all electric, no gas, nothing. And so here I am 4 years later, and I'm happy to tell you, I think I've done it. It's just going fine. I mean, I have homes big and small. I can handle full heavy leaf layers to, you know, the clients. Some clients really do want a nice lawn. I can handle that. I can do freedom lawns, you know, which is basically just mow it and whatever grows, it's fine. We control invasive species, you know, we handle all the jobs that any company does. When people call me, they say, what do you do? Do you just mow lawns? I said, no, I do full service, whatever you need. I waste my time trimming people's boxwoods if I have to. I try not to. Try to get them to dig them out. You know, the whole landscaping industry is truly, it's unguided, and therefore it's, you know, aloof. And I'd say it's pretty insane. I watch the way the guys work. I talk to all the landscapers I can, and they're all very interested in what I do. I share my methods and my equipment and my organic ways. A lot of it has to do with just thinking smarter, you know, how to group debris, how to do things a little more efficiently. And that's allowed me to be a good landscaper with electric machines, because, you know, I don't want to use all the battery power I have moving the leaves across the whole property. we group things and use tarps and rakes. And we try not to blow unless it's really needed. And I'll tell you, the blowers really are helpful for landscaping and needed at some times of the year. So to not have them in the industry, that would be interesting. So, you know, having them is useful. Having them every day, yeah, is useful. There's going to be a time, even any month of the year, where you're like, oh, I wish I had a quick blower. But using them extensively every day, all year long, is just ridiculous. It's not needed. So there's a learning curve, I'd say, with, you know, how to do some of the things, like how to care for the leaves. But when the question comes down to you guys, and we're talking about experts who are sharing how it's much better for the environment, it's much better for human health. We're talking to humans in your own town that are really suffering from this. I mean, I have my own family members being like, why don't you work near me? You know, I mean, people are going nuts. I love the mental health reference. It's valid. I mean, people need peace and quiet, and it's a natural resource in a way. So I'm very much sold that it works. I'd be happy to show you a quick few slides if you'd like to, and I could just talk to you how it works so you can visualize it. Let's see, I'm going to share a screen, and I don't know if you can see it yet. Can you? Yeah. Is it full screen? Not yet. Let's see. Is that full screen for you now? Thank you. Okay. So lawns are huge. That's a big part of the irrigated landscape in the US. It's something like 1%. It's just ridiculously important. And that's why I'm a guy who's promoted native plants and butterflies and forget the lawns for a long time. But I'm went into lawns to get it done right, because people do want, you know, they want a great piece of lawn next to their native plant garden. We're not getting running grass. So I went to see if we could do it right. It's very important. There is 1.9% of the continental US, and that was years ago. It's very bad. This is my company. I can do it. Any lawn, any quality, high quality, we can mow it, take care of it. We mulch mow our leaves in. This actually was terrible, this photo. There was nothing under that tree as far as grass goes, but we brought grass back in with zero chemicals. All we used was seed and compost and electric mowers. This is what I'd like to see. These are some of the lawns that we take care of. As you can see, that, you know, people complaining that they'll have upset customers it's just not going to be true. They can have great lawns, electric, all year long. Here's me. Gosh, I look 4 years younger. I feel 4 years older. And, you know, these are the 48-inch mowers. You get bigger ones too. These are great, big, huge machines. I can take care of 10 acres at a time with a couple of those, and 3 guys, one with a weed whacker, an electric weed whacker. That weed whacker goes all day long, doesn't break down, starts every time. All you have to do is change the string like a regular one. All the other weed whackers I see, I've never seen somebody not struggle. So this equipment is very good, just like a regular landscaper. If you're wondering, should we really tell the guys they can't use their gas mowers or their, look, and here I'm telling you, I'm bringing you to the next step, electric mowers. Why not? I'm going to just point out, I've never heard anybody mention it, but of course it's obvious. Have you heard the mowers? They're loud as can be as well. I've heard some ones that are deafening, but let's get them. Let's restrict gas mowers. Let's ban gas mowers. Allow blowers. And then allow gas mowers to continue for some time. As soon as they get into electric blowers and trimmers, they're going to be like, oh, dude, I want an electric mower too. Like, we're all like guys and gals who want cool machines. I have a gal friend who has pink trucks, and guys, they're like, oh, I got my new this, my dump trailer, so it's all about equipment in this game. So people are really going to enjoy it. There's no difference driving one of these from another one. And by the way, I can adjust them very, very finely to the 1/4 inches. I even use like homeowner model of Ego mowers just to do the smaller, lighter spots. Here's a picture of the trimmers. You could see they're used. We've got hedge trimmers. Okay, we've got chainsaws. Here's a group of blowers. One of my tricks of the trade is one hand, one blower. So if you're a guy or a gal working, you've got 2 blowers in your hands, one in each hand. That changes everything. That's how I blow leaves with an electric blower. 2 at once. One stream of air doesn't work. Okay, it works, but watch, you see the guys blowing with their gas blowers. It's very inefficient. They're standing there, their buddies are helping them. So with these, we use 2. One person uses 2. It's like literally like 2 people. It changes everything. We use our machines as a tractor. Look at that. Dang. Don't tell the mower company who still has a warranty out. Anyways, I even look at this. I do spraying. Of course, it's like organic treatments of like Neptune's fish and kelp and all that good stuff. But I could put, a sprayer tank in the back. I use a battery powered car battery jump pack to power the electric on that electric pump. And we cover like a 45-foot circle in 2 minutes. It's pretty amazing. This is, electric mower. This is an electric mower. I mean, these are properties. Imagine how many leaves fall. And this is just a corner of the property, so it's possible to do this electric. And I mean, I have kicked the wheels. I've left these things in the rain. I've done this, I've done that. I've basically been an irresponsible landscaper as much as I could to see what would break. And it's hanging in there. I mean, I've repaired some things, but that's my fault. I shouldn't go into those ditches. I've innovated a little. I think that we bring back the old. This is a lawn sweeper. In the metal thing there is kind of like it's a brush, and as you pull it, the belts turn the brush, and so you're really just using your electric mower. And if you have that fancy client who needs fancy lines, or you need to clean all the leaves, but this is really helpful though for like, especially think of spring cleanups. The guys go out there and they blow the heck out of the land. If they would go out there with a sweeper instead, they'd sweep up about 80% of the problem, and then maybe they could blow and rake the rest. So if it's a real high profile client, I can add a sweeper. Or if there's nuts and sticks, or if it's been a hurricane, I add a sweeper. It's pretty simple. So, this is kind of my story. Look, it's a truck. It looks like all the other trucks out there driving around Fairfield County. And it cuts grass and makes money. And I don't, oh, by the way, I don't charge more. I basically charge the same, we carry boxes of charging batteries. So this is how we do this in the industry. And there is my company and 4 others that I know of in the region that can service people. I'd like to see, 400, because there's about 4,000 companies, I would guess, around here. By the way, that's a lawn that looked like dirt like 3 months earlier. So that's what like organic can do. You don't need the chemicals. We don't need the gas. We do it all with compost. This is top dressing. That's a heavy top dressing. That's like a reseeding. But, there's that pool on the left. There's that pool on the right 3 months later. So if you wonder if organic works, I'd argue it works. And we only use electric mowers and blowers and all that good stuff. So that's my story. That's my shtick. And I hope you like my slides. And, I'm glad I could make it back in so we could join this presentation. I was out mowing today, mulch mowing everything in. And when it got too deep, the guys went out and we gathered the extra leaves and put them on a tarp, put them into the woods. And in general, we go along all the edges, along all the bushes and all the beds before anything, and push all the leaves under the bushes, all the leaves under the trees, push them in everywhere we can, like your presenter said, into the woods. And once that's done, there's very little to mulch mow if you want to mulch mow. I mean, when I see oak leaves, I try to collect them and move them into the woods because they're especially good for pollinators. But yeah, I'm a landscaper and I'm making it. And I encourage Norwalk to join Bedford and let's say Dobbs Ferry and I don't know, Scarsdale, Rye, all these little towns nearby and the other couple hundred far away, and just slap a ban on the gas, make it an extensive ban, at least for the summer. I'd say for a year at most, if you have to, let them use their gas for the spring and fall. But after 1 year, phase in a full ban. If you want to be really cautious, give them fall and spring for 2 years. But after that, a full ban, because there's no need for them. I mean, just, by the way, force them to do it for a summer. And believe me, they're going to go buy the blowers because they're not going to live without their little blowers. And then they're going to be sold on it. And they'll still want to bring out their massive rolling blower in the fall for the first year or so. And then they have to service it and it costs $300. And, over time, they will not want to use their gas mowers and big rolling blowers is my hope. So I hope I help show you what I do.
See some hands being raised, Jeff. So maybe I can slow you down a little bit and let Mr. Livingston and any others who might have some questions for you.
Should I click this button? Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Jeff, for coming out. It's really interesting and helpful to hear this. You answered one of my questions, which was about the cost to your customers. I wonder if you can answer the question about whether what's your view of the equipment is. Does it cost more and how does it hold up compared to gas equipment?
Well, I'd say it holds up just fine compared to gas equipment. And I don't need to do an annual tune-up, which is $200 to $300 for all the big mowers. I don't ever have breakdowns with my blowers or trimmers. My mower doesn't really break down, any more than any other. So, that's been pretty good. The cost of buying into the equipment, probably slightly different, yeah. But mowers are still expensive. They can be $10,000 with their gas, easily. Mine's electric. It happens to be closer to $20,000. Yeah, it's not a joke. $20,000 piece of equipment. But for that, I'm also getting access to customers who want only electric. Okay, so there's a marketing angle there where it might be easier for me to find clients than other gas companies coming online. So if I'm a gas company that starts offering electric, they will quickly find clients seeking them. Okay, that's a benefit. So having that equipment will bring you that. It will also bring you no gas on your hands, no gas on your truck, which really changes the smell in the environment. Okay. You've got a real exposure to gasoline, which we all know. Even like at a gas pump, according to the EPA, you should be wearing like gloves, rubber gloves when you're pumping gas or doing a gas, and nobody does. So like you're getting a human health exposure through the skin. Okay. Then the guys are out there. It's hard to keep good guys around, right? So having this equipment makes them happy because when they're with me, they go home at the end of the day without a carbon monoxide headache, which they told me was standard. They said, hey, what are you talking about, boss? Every day we have a headache.
Excuse me, just to be clear, you mentioned the mower was when you use.
Would you mind, Jeff, not sharing your screen anymore so we can see the other panelists so we can all, because there may be other hands raised. And then Tom, please continue.
Sure. You mentioned the mower. Just to be clear, that was the mower you were talking about that was so much more. Do you happen to know offhand in terms of the gas powered blowers versus electric blowers?
The blowers are only like $200 each, and other blowers are much more expensive. Here's a spread. I'm looking at a spreadsheet. If you want me to share the screen, is that okay if I could quickly share the screen?
That is like a slide I was interested to see.
Okay, let's see that. Okay, can you see that there's a spreadsheet now?
Yeah.
Where it says NA, we're talking about and above gas, okay? And below, you know, battery, okay? We're talking about $300 versus $5, you know?
So they're cheaper.
The battery machine is a little cheaper to buy at first, okay? And then there's some buy-ins, you buy some extra batteries, maybe the spreadsheet talks about other costs. But then look, this is your monthly usage of fuel. Gas is basically burning $50 a month, and electric is burning about 10. Here's the top, weekly. That's a weekly operating, I'm sorry, weekly operating, okay? So the total purchase for gas in this here is $500-600. Total purchase is, ooh, with the fancy one, with everything and bells and whistles, maybe $400, maybe $1,000. But every week you're saving $40, and there's about 30 weeks of mowing in the season minimum. Okay, so that starts adding up, and then there's no, you know, like maintenance really. I mean, occasionally the batteries crap out on you. You got to buy a new one. Okay, so I'm going to call it this. I'm going to call it a wash on the equipment. Okay, Tom. I think that in the end, gas costs you, electric costs you, but you're cleaner with the electric. And you know, it's I wouldn't, I'm not seeing after 4 years that it's way more expensive. And I'm not sending two guys to the gas station at that $1 per hour rate filling tanks either, right? They get back to the office, it takes them 2 minutes to unload the batteries and put them on chargers.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's really helpful. One last question. Is the life of these units about the same?
The mowers,
No, the blowers, or is the life?
Yes.
about
Yeah,
the
I'd
same?
say they last for a long time. Yeah.
Okay,
They
thank
do.
you.
Yeah.
Great. Do other council members have questions for Jeff or any of our panelists? Looks like we're set. So
Great.
thank you to all of our presenters, Louise, Jeff, Alice. I think that Sarah's already left us. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. We really appreciate it. And we'll be doing some more work on this in coming weeks and months. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, kudos to you guys for listening to us and taking up the issue. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming this evening. Nora, do you have a question before
Just
he leaves?
one quick question. You know, we've already been doing some looking into sort of the ways we could assist people in making this transition, but are you familiar with any, you know, organizations that are offering grants or providing technical assistance for landscape crews who are interested in making this transition?
No, I don't know of anybody helping with technical assistance for equipment. I have my thoughts on that. I will say that NOFA does have their organic training. They do cover a bit about quiet communities, but in general, if you get people on the organic angle training, they might have scholarships is my point here, the NOFA organic land care thing. And before I left, we were able to get it into Spanish. Okay, so the standards are in Spanish, and they might, you know, give you very discounted costs on training organic. Here's my thoughts on the equipment. It's a company. You know, handouts I love, sure, but you know, I don't think it's really needed. But what I think would be useful, you know, think about a financing model where basically almost every company is going to buy a mower or something expensive. Okay, if they could apply to an organization or something like you know how Connecticut has the solar panel program. If you could finance at 0% a mower for at 20% or, you know, your equipment. That would be great, you know, instead of, even if it was a rate of, you know, some rate above zero, but, you know, versus like, you know, giveaways or whatever. And I just thought maybe that's a way to do it. Whereas the gas, the gas mowers, they would have to pay a bank to buy that mower, right? So if you give them an opportunity to get a 0% financing on equipment, maybe that's an incentive.
No, I think that's terrific. And it actually aligns with something we've been talking about, which is our new Kiva program here in the city, where we are assisting folks in seeking zero interest loans through Kiva. This might really be a perfect partnership because, as you said, it's a way of getting people the capital that they would ultimately need to pay back, but at a cheaper rate than a bank would. So it could certainly be an incentive there. So anyway, but we're always collecting resources. It's very helpful for people making the transition. So thank you very much. This has been profoundly helpful to all four panelists. A lot of great information.
You're welcome.
Mr. Meek, you've got your hand raised.
Give me a little unmute there, Mr. Meek.
Yep. Or
okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Now you can.
Yeah, my question was, in all of this, little context, but our leaf dump is open on average of 30 hours a week year round. It closes randomly without notice. Is there any recommendation from any of the experts here on having a leaf dump? Does that facilitate homeowners raking their own leaves and bringing them there, or do they end up hiring a contractor because they just don't have time for the banker's hours that the leaf dump operates? Thanks.
So you're just to reiterate your question, you're asking whether or not you think any of the experts might know the answer to whether people hire landscapers because they don't have time to take the leaves to our facility during the hours that they're offered?
Yep.
Well, fair enough. I mean, being able to get to the center is important for a lot of homeowners. Hopefully the homeowners that are doing their own lawns have less leaves to carry and cart away. I know in the industry, it is a little challenging for us to get, if we've got to get rid of debris for some reason. And I never haul grass clippings ever, never need to remove, but leaves occasionally, barely. But the hours, having them open would be better if it was contractor friendly as well as residential.
Thank you.
But I think I mean, Louise and Alice, I'm not misrepresenting your testimony to say that the idea is that it's better to leave the leaves on your yard than haul them. So it's better to leave your yard, either mulch them in or put them in your garden beds. That's the better practice in any event.
Yeah, in beds, under trees, in places away, you know, that you can stand to.
Mulch.
That's the important thing, yeah. I mean, even mulch mowing leaves, which is necessary to, if there's too heavy leaf matter on the lawn, then it can hurt the lawn. But even mulching is going to destroy any chrysalises or,
for sure,
you know, creatures that are there. So just waiting till the spring to do all that is really the way to protect pollinators.
Great. Any further questions on this? Otherwise, we'll move on the agenda to minutes and other business. Great. Well, again, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you for joining us. And I think now what we should do is turn our attention to the acceptance of the minutes. So these would be the minutes for October 18th, 2022. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as they've been presented? Mr. Livingston, does anybody have some changes to those minutes? It looks like there's a few hands up. Nora, are you frozen or do you have changes to the minutes?
Frozen, sorry.
Okay, got it. For some reason, my screen's freezing a lot, so it might be my mine. All right, so all in favor of accepting the minutes as—
Wait, I'm sorry, Lisa. I just want to make one change, the beginning of page 2. It says, Mr. Goldstein said the ordinance committee's work was contingent on the zoning committee. That needs a couple changes.
Yeah.
Just to make it really simple, I would say that Mr. Goldstein said that the cannabis ordinance, basically it's not, the effective date of the cannabis ordinance is contingent on Planning and Zoning Commission passing their regulations.
Brian, did you pick that up? Because are you the person in charge of the minutes?
Yeah, I'm in charge of the minutes. Hold on. I got part of it. Mr. Goldstein said that the effective date of the cannabis ordinance is contingent on the
Passage of the Planning and Zoning regulations. That's it. That's all I got.
Great, thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
So with that change, there's a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as now amended. All in favor? Mr. Meeks, are you in favor of the minutes, or maybe you weren't there that day? Let me just.
He
double check.
raised his hand. He raised his hand.
Okay.
Yeah, you're correct. I'll abstain. Sorry, I lost track. of which meeting.
Okay, great. So we have
I abstain, Lisa. David Huvelman
David
abstains.
and Brian, and sorry, my screen's freezing, so the hands seem to be not going up. And everybody else who was there, Lisa, Josh, Tom, Dominique, and Nora, accepted the minutes. So we're good. So the last piece of business for this evening is to discuss Chapter 55, the demolition delay ordinance, and this is Mr. Livingston's work. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, I am going to turn this over to Todd Bryan, who's head of the Norwalk Preservation Trust, as well as I think Dana Laird, who is here as well, who is chair of the Historical Commission, to give you a little background on the demolition delay ordinance and what we are proposing here. So with your permission, I'll ask Todd to go first and give a little background.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I am Todd Bryant, the president of the Norwalk Preservation Trust, and we have long hoped for the ability to have this discussion to update our demolition ordinance. And I think behind me, you can see why. This is the remains of 23 Willow Street, the oldest house, arguably the oldest house, or once was the oldest house in Norwalk. The homeowners claimed, or the owners claimed that it was a mistake. I argue that one doesn't, do this kind of demo, and that it was the issue was they were trying to remove a roof. If you see the equipment in this image behind me, that's not what you use to take off a roof. And if you do it on a Saturday and you discover that there's been, more demolition than you expected, wouldn't you stop and go talk to the buildings department? And the reason that they didn't is because there are the penalties for demolition without a permit in Norwalk are very lax. They don't really have a lot of teeth. And one of the things that we are asking in this revised ordinance is to give the offense of demolishing a home, no matter what it is, how old it is, without a permit, some teeth. And I think that's a reasonable request. There's state enabling legislation to allow that to happen. Of course, we're more, as a preservation trust, we're more concerned with older houses. But I think this will apply to any building. And I think the wording that we've worked out, Tom and Bill Ireland and I have been working on this for the better part of a year to boil it down to what's been submitted. And I think that it would, in general, clarify a lot of things about how demolition is done, why we need demolition delay, and what's accepted, what you can do without going through this process. So, am I right, Tom? Or
yes, thank you. Yeah. So, let me follow up on that if I could. So as Todd said, we've been working on this for a while. We have major impetus with the demolition of the property behind Todd, that sort of put a little fire under our feet to get
It's
this.
kind of our, sorry, but kind of our Penn Station.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that we are not talking about proposing a whole new ordinance. We're proposing amendments to the existing ordinance. And what I'd like to do, just briefly go through what those amendments are, because there's some misunderstanding about what we're doing. And I'm just going to run through the version that is for the people looking at the package, is the proposed amendments dated 11/7/22. I'm just going to, again, go through it quickly, just to give people an idea of what we're doing. The first section on purpose was already there. What we've done, though, is on the section 55-2 is added a definition of demolition. Strangely enough, there never was a definition for demolition, and it was really what our chief building official, Bill Ireland, in consultation with some other people in the community, like Todd or Dana, decided was a demolition. And while I have absolute faith in Bill's not getting any younger, and we think it makes sense to actually define what demolition is in the ordinance. And so we've done that. And its demolition means any wrecking activity directed to disassembling, dismantling, dismembering, and or raising the exterior of any building or structure or part thereof. This is a pretty standard definition used throughout the state of Connecticut and other ordinances. But we did also add an exception to that, it's not intended, this ordinance is not intended to prevent ordinary maintenance or repair of buildings. So there's a balance there. I mean, the balance is that we are concerned about buildings being demolished, but we also don't want to overwhelm our residents and Bill and whoever's in this place in the future, having to deal with like somebody who wants to come in and just replace the roof, say, without changing the architectural design, essentially, of the building. And so it's somewhat of a balance to try and make this workable for both residents and the preservation community as well. And so, David, you have a question, I see, but let me run through this quickly and I'll just go through this. I'll just really highlight the stuff that's new and what isn't new. We're not changing the period. It was 50 years old, has always been there. A building is 50 years or older is subject to this ordinance. We have added in provision for any building listed on the historic Norwalk resources inventory, but that almost by definition, Todd, I think you'll say all buildings over 50 years old, so they're on it anywhere. Anyway, but the point of adding that in is just that we can hopefully expand that inventory so we'll make it easier to administer this ordinance. In terms of the application procedure, we've just clarified the procedure, and we did take out the requirement that applicants had to publish the notification in the newspaper because, quite frankly, it's not that relevant anymore. But we did add in that they have to give notice to the property owners across the street in addition to the property owners next to adjoining property owners. So that's a little change there. We also provided that the sole basis of an objection is that a building to be demolished is not architecturally or historically significant. We did that to stop any sort of frivolous objections, like a neighbor doesn't like his neighbor or her neighbor and decides they would just want to object to what they're doing. That's not the point of this ordinance. The point of this ordinance is to preserve the history of Norwalk. And so we don't want it being misused. We also added a provision that allows the party objecting to withdraw that objection. In the current ordinance, there's not that provision. So while I think we all think it can be moved forward without the withdrawal, we want to make it clear that if that's withdrawn, we can just move forward with whatever's going on. We added a provision on demolition by neglect. What we're worried about is in a situation where somebody's under a demolition delay, they decide, well, we're going to let the building fall apart on its own, and therefore we're not demolishing it, it's just happening. So we don't want that to happen. So we've added this provision on demolition by neglect. That is, I think, from the Connecticut State Preservation Statute. Todd, I think that came from there.
Yeah, I think, yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. On exceptions, there are exceptions already in the ordinance, we added two more. One is that if a building has to be lifted for FEMA purposes, for flooding and the like, that's an exception for this. We also added a situation where the director of health determines that a building's a threat to public health. That's similar to what we have there now, about being unsafe. If the chief building official determines a building's unsafe, so it's just another point there. One of the key provisions we've changed is to extend the current delay of 120 days to 180 days. That's to give everybody more time to look at the actual demolition. It's necessary in a growing city where there's so many properties and so few people looking at them, quite frankly. We have Todd, fortunately, and the Historical Commission headed by Dana looking at this in Pearl, Ireland, but that's a lot for a small number of people to do it. So the idea is to give them a little more time to do it. And then last but not least, and this subject is still under review by Brian, we've increased the violations and fines. Right now, our current ordinance provides for a fine of up to $100 a day. We believe we can increase it to $250 a day. It's the maximum under state law that we can do. So we're increasing that. But we have also added this provision on 55-8B, which again is still under review, but provides that in the event of a violation, the chief building official could impose a restriction of up to 2 years, during which no work can be done on the property. Now, that's there because a dollar penalty might not be that significant, but if somebody can't do anything on the property for a long time, that would be significant. So that's being added in. So that's the quick summary of the changes. There's some wordsmithing in this from the current ordinance, but what the main changes are what I just identified. David or Todd, did you want anything to that?
Now I'm unmuted. Yeah, that was a great summary. I think, and I think it covers everything that we talked about. And one of the things, I wrote a paper on this in grad school on demolition delays. And in Massachusetts, for example, they have true home rules so that they don't require a enabling legislation from the state to do whatever they need to do in their own ordinances. And there are some towns in Massachusetts that have a 5-year moratorium on any permits on the property if they demolish a building without a permit. So this is relatively mild, but it's still going to get their attention. So and the 180 days is allowed by state enabling legislation.
Yeah, and by the way, Westport and Stanford both have 180 days. David?
Thanks, Tom. Couple just things. I'm confused about which is it 50? It's in section B. Where you go D and then E. So
where are you? Oh, D, E, because that's 55.
55.5, I think it is. Is that what I'm in?
5, yeah, B.
5B. Sorry, there's
E.
a lot of red line. I'm working.
Yeah, that's why I didn't use that version, but go ahead. Okay.
I know. Of course, that's the version that I had my notes on. It's E. The Norwalk Historical Commission may hold a public hearing.
Right.
Why may? I mean, if there's an issue.
Well, they don't. Let's read the language here.
If someone, I'm assuming this is when someone objects, correct?
Right. There may be ways to work around having a hearing. There may be ways to negotiate without having a hearing.
What's the mechanism for that, though? I'm not understanding that, because then if there's an objection, 180 days rolls out. What's the determination of the end of the objection? Is it the historical commission has to make a ruling on that? Is that how that works? I'm not.
Todd, you want to answer that? Because you've been through this. lived through
Yeah,
this.
yeah. It's at the end of 180 days, you're done. I mean, they can tear it down. But not every the historical commission is not necessarily, they don't necessarily want to hold a public hearing on every demolition delay. So this gives them the flexibility to hold one when they think it's important.
Otherwise, the historical commission meets and makes a determination without a public hearing.
About whether or not they're going to hold whether or not they're going to hold a public hearing on it. There's no requirement in any demolition delay that I've ever seen, although there may be one somewhere, that requires a public hearing.
Okay, but what I'm saying is someone objects, right? There's an objection. Who makes the determination on the objection?
There is no determination there. It's if there's an objection, then the delay goes into effect
For 180 days, and after 180 days, you're done?
Yeah, unfortunately,
yeah.
That's all the state enabling legislation allows for.
Yeah, the objection can be filed and that automatically does it.
So I file an objection, 180 days later, they still tear the building down.
It can be done.
Yep.
Okay.
We can't do anything more than that.
Next question I have is in the definition, you've got it referring to exterior. I'm gonna get to the
or exterior. We limit it to exterior.
What happens in the situation of an interior demolition where they're going to tear out the inside of the building but leave the shell?
Unfortunately, as far as I know, there's no, much like a local historic district commission, the city has no ability to control what you do inside the house.
As long as whatever is proposed conforms to code.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't stop any of the internal.
No. Right.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. I wanted to.
Yeah, David. When you start getting into it, it's a little frustrating because the power is really limited.
Well, yeah, I know that. I know we're in that. State tells us what we ultimately can or can't do. So we do have that, but I appreciate you guys working on this. I really do. I wish we had it in place. So
do we.
4 weeks ago. So
exactly right.
Yeah. All right.
We would not be looking at it.
Thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you.
Josh?
Hi, I also want to echo what David said and what others have said. I mean, this is important and I'm really appreciative of the work you guys put into this. I do have a question. I have a broader question on some of the 50 years parameters and stuff like that, but I'm not going to steal Nora's thunder. I know she has some thoughts on this too, but I want to talk a little bit about the penalties here, because you said you're giving it some teeth, but it looks like it was amended from the fine being $500 to $250. I'm assuming that's because of the hearing officer issue. I know we ran into a similar issue with cannabis. I don't know if this is the same issue or if there's a different enabling statute issue. The only question I want to know, or not the only question, but something I was wondering, was whether there needs to be in an ordinance a private right of action. So say, the owners of this home, for example, a few weeks ago, who wanted their roof fixed, but instead there was this demolition. I don't know exactly what the facts are, but let's say that, they were expecting only to have their roof fixed to find out that instead their home was demolished. I don't know if we need to provide a private right of action or if that's something that's in the state enabling legislation. When you say you put teeth into this in terms of the penalty section, I'm wondering how that manifests here, because I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm going to defer to Brian because he's still researching this. And by teeth, I mean more teeth than we had, which were limited teeth. They were baby teeth, and now we get a little bit more teeth.
I know, yeah.
But Brian, do you want to respond to Josh?
Yeah. I mean, look at the equipment and look at what happened. If that was a mistake while trying to take off a roof, I will eat it. Every piece of that wood.
Well, right. I mean, and then the only question would be either did the homeowner knowingly engage a contractor for a purpose for which they weren't permitted to do, but I don't want to I know the corporation counsel and legal counsel is getting into this, and I don't want to get ahead of skis on this particular example, but I do want to, if the claim is this ordinance is going to prevent stuff like this from happening again, I'm not really sure how that's the case.
I don't think that's what we're saying.
I was wondering, that was the impression I got, and I just wanted to make sure that was not what you were saying, because I just don't see that here.
Yeah.
Well, I think the penalties alone are enough to, I mean, people need to be careful. This was not a mistake. I mean, and the reality is that very, very few demolition delays are actually invoked. I mean, in both in the existing ordinance and we left it in there, the building department has to do a report. So you can take a look at that report and see how very, very few are ever invoked, and how many go to the end. The whole thing's in the report, and it's a microscopic amount of. I mean, if there's one or two a year, and I can say that with some certainty because I'm the guy that almost always invokes the delay.
And just
thanks, Todd.
Josh, back to your question. Brian Candela is going to be looking at the penalty provisions and the enforcement and all that, right, Brian?
Just very briefly, we're looking into it. As everyone knows here, municipalities are limited in the penalties that they can provide unless an enabling statute provides said ability to do that. The $250, which you see listed here, is through the scope of municipal power, section 7-148. That's something that we can rely on frequently in our ordinances when there isn't other enabling authority. We're still looking at the statutes that concern this type of demolition, and we're hopeful to have an answer for this committee prior to the next meeting.
Thank you. Nora?
Thank you, Tom. And, thank you, Tom and Todd, for your work on this. And I certainly, share everyone's concerns about what happened a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, a house of, 1651 or, that kind of era is not a house that we want to see demolished. That said, I have a lot of concern about this ordinance, largely because of the breadth of it. And I recognize that the 50-year limit is a limit that pre-exists this amendment. But I am very concerned that expanding our ability to delay substantial, modifications of homes that are not functional really pushes against our environmental goals and our affordable housing goals. 50 years ago is, 1972. This is not, the likelihood of a house from 1972 being sort of historical significance is pretty limited. And to the extent that they are, some of the homes in my neighborhood, for instance, might have some architectural significance, then looking at other sort of national historical designations. But I am really concerned about the sort of impetus here to preserve at the expense of implementing environmentally sound housing. When you have a house that was built in the 1950s out of cruddy material because it was intended as a summer beach cottage, and it was then converted to a year-round residence, and it is drafty and it leaks, and it turns out that it was largely constructed with unacceptable materials. You're really looking at a house that is probably more efficiently torn down and rebuilt. And so, I really question the breadth of this and whether it would be better targeted at homes that are older or that have more historic significance. And I also question, quite frankly, the value of expanding to 180 days. If there has not been a proposal for a new buyer or some better solution at 120 days, I don't really understand what the additional 60 days gets us, other than, again, increasing housing construction costs, increasing impediments to building new homes. You know, I look at the house that was blocked on Lowndes Street, which I drove by every day. I don't know what the value was of blocking that house, right? That is the potential to put new housing in there that would be far more energy efficient. And is in fact, because, you know, they're likely to be able to split the property, will probably increase the units available. And the house was a wreck. There was no chance that anyone was going to be able to save that house. I walked by it every day for, years. So it just, I certainly respect the concern for truly historic homes, but the sweep of this seems to me to far exceed that. And Todd, I hear that you are suggesting that this gets invoked a couple of times a year, but if it only gets invoked a couple of times a year, then making it more targeted is, to my mind, more likely to cause people to respect it and be engaged with it. I would also add, in sympathy to homeowners, is there a marking or a designation on people's deeds that alerts them to the fact that they are possibly have this kind of a limitation enforced before they purchase the property? An issue that we've also run into in some of the neighborhoods around mine, Harbor Shores, this has come up quite a lot. Folks buy the homes knowing they need renovations and having no idea about the restrictions that are going to basically, push them into exponential costs. Or people bought the homes 20 years ago and they want to do substantial renovations now and can't afford to do so. So they have to sell their homes instead of maintaining them. So I'm really reluctant to suggest what strikes me as a sort of, massive leaf blower type solution to what I think is a fairly targeted actual set of problems directed at a fairly small number of historically significant homes. So that's my kind of 2 cents on this. And I certainly would love to hear your thoughts on kind of how this has really played out in practice and what we can do to be, again, more respectful for homeowners. Again, it's a different question also, I think, if we're talking about developers, but if you're talking about individual homeowners, for whom this is, again, almost certainly their major life asset, we really have to be respectful of, their needs in terms of being able to address a livable situation in the house that they own.
I'm going to let Todd respond to the historic preservation questions, but just a couple of things. We did wrestle with the time period and trying to make it so it's not overburdening. That's why we added in the exception for maintenance and things like that, which are not in the current ordinance. I do have to take issue with the efficiency thing, because I would argue that like a house George Washington lived in would not be very environmentally efficient, but that's not the reason we're saving it, right? But I'll let Todd get into that stuff. But I hear your argument, and this is the balance that goes through this thing. We're trying to figure out how to make this workable. We can't say only historic houses are covered by this until we define what are historic houses. So it's kind of circular in a way. But that is one reason we put in this reference to the Norwalk Resources Inventory with the idea of developing that so we can have a much better sense of what that is. But Todd, why don't you go ahead and respond?
Yeah, I mean, the 50 years old or older is the standard for the National Register of Historic Places. And it doesn't mean that every house that's 50 years old or older, that anybody who owns a house that's 50 years old or older and who applies for a demolition permit automatically has a 180-day delay. They put it in. I just a bunch of them in my email right now, and for the most part, we look at it. The Historical Commission looks at it. And if it doesn't appear to be, if it's not on anybody's list, and it doesn't appear to be, historically significant in any way, then nobody files a delay. And in terms of fixing the interior of the house or, making it more energy efficient. This is not, it doesn't, it has nothing to do with that really. The length of the delay is in a way intended to be a deterrent. Because, work all this stuff out before it gets to that point is what we're trying to say. Nobody wants to put on a delay. I mean, I think everybody would be perfectly happy to let people do what they need to do to their houses. But sometimes it's worth making them think twice, like we would have here had we known. And in terms of the one on Crockett Street, that building is in a National Register district, which I wrote. And it's significant because the district is called Oysterman's Row, and that house was built by an oystering family, which also built a house across the street. And there were several generations of those folks who lived in that house. So, we put the delay on it. The state was involved. The State Historic Preservation Office was involved because of the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act, which states that any building listed in or eligible for the National Register is protected from unreasonable demolition unless there is no prudent and feasible alternative. So between the State Historic Preservation Office, the Preservation Trust, the Historical Commission, we all came to the conclusion that, like you said, that there's so little integrity left in this house, physical integrity, that Dana from the Historical Commission, who's on this call and has her hand up, withdrew that demolition delay. So it's a much more flexible tool than it, I think you're looking at it as. It's something that basically it's a tool that encourages people to think twice.
And I certainly appreciate that. But like I said, I have concerns about the breadth of it and the lack of information that homeowners purchasing it have. I mean, again, to my mind, there should potentially then be deed notification when you purchase a house that your house could potentially fall into this category. I mean, there is, as someone who has dealt with some of these issues in my own life and my neighbors' lives, again, living in a neighborhood and bordering neighborhoods with a significant number of summer homes that were converted, where construction standards were just abysmal. These are real practical issues. And again, I take very much issue with the question that, demolition is not a solution to energy efficiency. There is only so much energy efficiency you can get if your house was built with cardboard, basically, so there's going to be real issues for a lot of folks. And again, I recognize, like many things, as Tom was talking about, part of our goal here is to decrease arbitrariness. Bill Ireland is terrific. He's, very expert. As Bill Ireland's decision is not the, we are trying to get away from having sort of a situation where, oh, don't worry about this, it'll be kind of managed appropriately. We want clear standards in place so that any homeowner can look at this and know what to expect. And I'm concerned about the potential for arbitrariness here, because as a homeowner, how do you know if you're likely to be, tagged with this, particularly if you have no reason to anticipate that your house has historic significance? If you buy a house that is from 1865, sure, you have some expectation that folks should be worried. I don't think anyone who purchases a home from the 1970s is expecting to get tagged with the possibility of their home being determined to be historically significant and facing a major delay if they find out that that the best solution, the cheapest, most efficient, most environmentally friendly solution is to demolish part or all of the home. So that's just my concern here. We don't need to beat a dead horse, but I just wanted to flag those concerns.
Right, and I understand that it makes a lot of sense. But the thing is that all those issues could be worked out beforehand, before somebody goes and pulls a demo permit.
Wait, excuse me, can we just let Dana speak? You noted that she raised her hand. Dana being the chair. Dana, sorry.
Hi, Dana Laird, Historical Commission Chair, and thanks for all your work, Common Council. Back to Willow Street, 21 Willow Street, this is not the first time this has happened. This has happened at least 3 times, including in 124 East Avenue and on Flax Hill at Soundview. I know this is 21 Willow Street is bound up with the legal department right now, but the owner was am I correct in assuming the owner was also the person that demolished it, or?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so a lot of times these people are kind of doing the work themselves, but anyway, yeah, we do need these for these cases. And Nora, I understand about your concerns about the housing. I don't think we've had anything from 72. Most of our stuff is probably early 20th century, where, you know, the latest we've been concerned about. But it does seem like, from our angle, it seems like it's always kind of a battle to, people are buying stuff in Norwalk because the land is almost more worth more than the house that sits on the land. In the case of like Tavern Island, things went ahead anyway. There's a few things that just went ahead somehow without clear-cut rules, and this is kind of saddening for us in the historical community. So yeah, 180. We're really hoping for 180 days because it gives us time to come up with a solution, like what would happen with 93 East Avenue. As Todd can tell you, that a solution was found that was agreeable to everybody involved in the city. Very prominent location there. Yeah, 21 Willow Street also had a plaque on it that said built in 1677. So there's no way they could not have known that wasn't the address. So obviously 1677 Willow Street. So yeah, I think that yeah, I'm looking forward to more teeth for this. And yes, of course, we also need housing in Norwalk as well. But yeah, thanks again. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and sorry, thanks, Dana, but I just want to add to that I have a photograph of where one of the first things they did was rip the plaque off the front of the house, while at the same time saying that they didn't know it was historic. And also the plaque, there was a photograph of the plaque in the Zillow listing.
So just moving forward. So Chair, I believe we're going to bring this back up for actual formal consideration in December. Nora, I'll be glad to talk to you, separately.
Yeah, me too.
And maybe, see if we can find some way of working through some of these things. Because this is really up here for discussion, so. And
Great.
introduction.
Well, thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. And I think that's all we have, unless anybody else has any new business. And assuming we have none, we wish Brian's wife a very happy birthday. Please apologize to her that we have a meeting on her birthday. We're so sad about that. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Somebody.
Give it to Dominique.
Dominique, I'm hoping that everybody's frozen on my screen. So I'm just going to say that Dominique put a motion to adjourn, and we are adjourned. Yes.
Okay.
I was about to do it for you guys. Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, everybody.